Chapter 7 in The Great Turkey Walk by Kathleen Karr. Thank heaven, my birds decided on making an early morning of it all by themselves. They were down from their roosts and gobbling to go barely after first light. I shuffled awake, feeling groggy from too little sleep. I rubbed at my cheeks and was surprised by the sudden roughness of them. There wasn't time to contemplate that, though. Instead, I dropped my hand and squinted through the low-lying mists. Then I gave J-Beth a poke in the ribs. Wah! Up popped his head. Atop him, Emmett's pointy little ears went erect. We gotta get us moving, boys. But I don't smell no coffee. Won't be none this morning, nor breakfast neither, aside from cold stew. We gotta hustle us and the birds down the road. J-Beth was suddenly so awake, it was as if I dashed him with a pail of water. Slave catchers? You find slave catchers in Jefferson City, Simon, sir? Maybe something worse. Mr. Peace thinks is how we might have some turkey rustlers on our trail. Just then, Mr. Peace himself came out of the woods from his morning ablutions. He was folding up his straight-edge razor. His face was all shiny and smooth. You tell our tale to J-Beth, Simon? Enough of it. All right, then. Let's go get these turkeys on the road. Bidwell Peace had listened chapter and verse to my story the night before. He didn't say aught about the bit where I got gold. I took that as a personal kindness on his part, since the more I thought about it, the more foolish I felt. Finally, I got to the section about Pa and his sudden interest in fatherhood and turkeys. Mr. Peace stroked his chin. Mind if I were to offer a little piece of advice, son? Considering as how I have been in this world a mite longer than you, and considering as how I ain't always been a drunk. I never thought of you. Well, I never thought you was, Mr. Peace. I never thought you was, Mr. Peace. Appreciate that, Simon. He reached for my empty plate and filled it up again. Them big days of the Santa Fe Trail, you mightn't believe it, but I had me my own mule train. Better than 20 wagons strong. Twice a year, I made the trip from Independence. Took to staying longer and longer on the Santa Fe end, though. Why was that, Mr. Peace? He scratched at his whiskers. Had me a sweetheart there. Prettiest little Mexican girl. Married her up and everything, he sighed. I was a happy man, Simon. You had any youngsters? I was getting into the story. 2 boys and a girl. They was sweet, too, J-Bet. Jabbered in American and Spanish both. And the way they climb all over me when I got back from months on the trail. I didn't think this story was going to have a happy ending, but I needed to find out. Then what? He threw a few more sticks on the fire. Got back one trip. They was all gone. From the cholera. Every last one of them. Took up the bottle about then. I sighed. At least you didn't leave them, Mr. Peace. Only for the job. Would have never abandoned my little family. That's what I was working up to, son. Your pa... He stopped. Needn't dance around it, Mr. Peace. Your pa, he don't sound the same kind of heartbroken I was. That crossed my mind. It truly did. Mr. Peace patted at the strands of gray hair atop his head. So if you agree with me that far, then you could maybe see to take the whole situation one step further? What'd that step be, Mr. Peace? Well, if your pa ain't broken up over you, Simon, you got to stop and think what might be rousing his interest. I stopped to think. Turkeys? Mr. Peace shook his head sadly. Not turkeys, Simon. Dollars. 5,000 of them come Denver. Oh... I cogitated that for a piece. But if he's really needing a little money, I won't begrudge it. Your pa don't sound like the sort to stop at a little, Simon. Don't mean to malign a man I never met, but he sounds more like the sort that want the whole lot. Oh, I thought some more. You mean like yours and mine and Miss Rogers's and even J-Beth's if he was to lend us a hand all the way out there. I do mean that. I set down my second helping of stew. Wasn't that hungry anymore. It's kind of hard to find and lose your paw all in the same day, Mr. Peace. I'm full of sympathy, son. I can feel exactly where it hurts. What do we do next? We set off early tomorrow and see what happens. Give the man a second chance. If he don't turn up after us, maybe, just maybe, I'd be reading the whole thing wrong. I brightened some. That'd be a good test, wouldn't it? Mr. Peace finished banking the fire for the night. As sure as shooting wood. But Pa did turn up after us, and he wasn't alone either. We'd been working the birds hard on the new road west from Jefferson City and just managed to herd them safely through the covered bridge over Upper Moreau Creek. We was all taking a little spell of rest on the other side, sort of fluffing up our feathers again, preparatory to moving on when it happened. Emmett heard the horse hooves clattering over the wooden slats of the bridge first and set into a barking jag. Funny thing about Emmett, he mostly ignored the stray wagon traffic we'd come upon along the road. He had his mind on his work and rarely even barked at the birds, except to keep them from grief. But his dander was up at this time. Mr. Peace and I got to our feet. Fast. Jabeth, too. He was sticking close to us today on account of the possible trouble we was halfway expecting. Strange, but even the weather had that anticipatory feel about it. The dawn fog had drifted off the ground, but never did burn away completely. Now the sky was gray and heavy, with wisps of low clouds still settled here and there, particularly around the water. So, as we looked back at that covered bridge, it was interesting to see these two horsemen bursting from the dark tunnel of its mouth, bursting through the shroud of mists around it, then careening to a halt not yards from our resting place. I turned to Mr. Peace. He was examining the horses first. It was his way, and it made sense. It was fine horse flesh quivering before us, all snorting and lathered with sweat. Should be. I recognized the animals as two of the fancy Arabians from the circus ring the night before, but my interest was held more by the riders. Afternoon, Pa. Mr. Cleaver? I nodded at the second rider. Ain't you both going to be missing out on your early circus show in Jefferson City? Simon. Pa swooped to the ground right graceful, but I wasn't really watching his style. Was more interested in the rifle he had cradled in one arm, and the full packs astride his saddle. Come to notice it, Cleaver, the coconut man, had full packs too, and a shiny revolver poking out from where he'd stashed it through a belt beneath his open vest. Seemed like mighty uncomfortable positioning to me on account of the fact that a man could nullify himself right quick if a gun were to go off with the barrel pointed in that location. I forced my eyes away. You contemplating a journey, Pa? Looks like you packed for one. Had me a sudden urge to see gold country, Simon. Could have took your circus steamboat to Independence easier. The steamboat can't get much past Independence. River's too rough. Also, the Missouri don't go as far as Denver. Well, I knew that. Then I just kept jabbering on about nothing in particular because I wasn't sure what was about to happen next. Also, I didn't feel like rushing into finding out. Mr. Peace must have felt the same way because he was busy calming them nervous, frothing mounts. He looked kind of unhappy at the way Pa and that Cleaver had treated such fine animals. I turned from the horses to check on how Jabeth was taking events. Strange, but Jabeth was nowheres to be seen. Seemed like he just melted himself into the mists coming off the creek. There being not much more to do, I bent to quiet Emmett. Hush, boy. These here men don't mean us no harm. Emmett felt otherwise. He stopped barking, but his entire body shivered beneath my hands. I could feel the twitching under his skin, and now his teeth was bared. Hadn't ever seen Emmett's teeth bared that ways. I took another moment to try to soothe him, using it as an excuse to do some thinking. Animals was always smarter than most people thought, and Emmett here was the smartest dog I'd ever had the pleasure of knowing. If Emmett thought Pa and Cleaver was up to mischief, hate to do this, son. Too late. Before I spun away from the dog, Pa had my hands caught behind my back. He was tying them tight with a good long thong of rawhide over to the horses. Cleaver had the revolver pointed at Mr. Peace. Want me to put this one out of his misery right off, Samson? He said. He's a fairly mangy specimen to begin with. Nah, Pa answered whilst I struggled mightily and uselessly in his iron grasp. Ain't much point and probably ain't worth the bullet. Just truss him up and haul him into the woods. It'll be a good long while before he gets loose. Then Pa apparently had another thought. Might do to gag him, though, in case any good Samaritan should head this way. Pa dragged me off to the woods, too, after he strung up my legs worse than any squealing hogs. As he was stuffing his huge handkerchief rather tenderly into my mouth, he left me with a few words of fatherly advice. Now, don't you be holding this against me, Simon, but the way you skedaddled before dawn, I got the distinct idea you didn't want to share any of your birds, not even with your poor, long-lost Pa. Me and Cleaver, we got fed up on the circus round about the moment I explained your turkey walk. We got to make some distance now before my old comrades discovered two of their prize horses has bolted the barn, so to speak. He'd finished stuffing and was knotting a red neckerchief around the gag and behind my head for good measure. You have yourself a fine life, son. Steer away from confidence games and don't take no wooden nickels. Pa gave me a friendly pat on the head and was gone. Shortly thereafter, it started in to rain, cold and hard. Simon, you all right, Simon? I opened my eyes. There was Jabeth hunkering over me, my Bowie knife in his hand, and genuine concern spread across his face. It was all I could manage to say. Hang on, I'll get you freed up in 2 shakes. And he did. I spit out the gag with relief. You didn't call me sir. Thank you, Jabeth. Thank you kindly. My pleasure, sir. But he was grinning with delight as he set to with my arms and legs. Then I was hobbling up, rubbing at the rawhide burns on my wrist. Never did know my own paw, Simon, Jabez started in again, but if they's all like that. The topic was a sore one at the moment. I changed the subject. You find Mr. Peace? Sure did. Unragged him, and he said to take care of you first. I glanced around some more through the dripping trees. What about Emmett? They didn't go and take Emmett, too, did they? No way. He's keeping company with Mr. Peace. Already had half of his leg thongs chewed off. That news relieved me mightily. All right, then. You just earned you a portion of my enterprise, Jabeth. Always allowing that we get them birds back where they belongs. He blinked and almost looked insulted. Ain't rescued you for no reward, Simon. Rescued you 'cause you're my friend. Ain't never had a friend before. Well, that warned me as good as Miss Rogers' farewell hug. I shook the cold rain from my head and felt way better. You know something, Jabeth? I ain't never had a friend before either. But if you want to come to Denver, you still get a share fair and square. Since you puts it like that, we slapped each other on the back, then set off for Mr. Peace. I figured we had some heavy thinking to do.